amidst rapidly evolving global issues. There's strong support in Quebec for addressing these concerns, particularly regarding Trump's America, which is seen as no longer a global leader, disrespecting democracy, peace, and justice. Key issues include leveraging Russian assets in Europe for Ukraine's war efforts and reconstruction, a complex matter impacting finance and currencies. Increased joint investments between Ukrainian and Canadian Quebec companies are crucial for market diversification. Trump is viewed as both a threat to global balance and an economic predator, using prices as a weapon. Public investment should rise, with Canada meeting its 2% GDP military spending commitment, especially as Europe bolsters its security support for Ukraine. Opportunities exist, even in military matters, to aid Ukraine in restoring peace. We must address Trump's unpredictable behavior and economic threats by proactively increasing Quebec and Canadian contributions to European support for Ukraine, benefiting our economy. Regarding Mr. Lotalik's offer to cut the pair in half on prices, a clear and consistent approach is needed. Mr. LeBlanc's stance of no price is a strong negotiating position. We should aim for a swift, comprehensive trade agreement, avoiding prices as a tool of insecurity. Quebec's economic sectors shouldn't be sacrificed to protect Ontario's auto industry or other interests. The Bloc Québécois will ensure Quebec's interests are protected in negotiations, advocating for free trade with exceptions and cautioning against becoming unreliable suppliers. Trump aims to force companies back to the U.S., but economic realities may alter his approach. The Bloc Québécois will maintain cohesion against Trump's policies, ensuring Quebec's interests aren't compromised. We need a broad coalition, Canada, Mexico, Quebec, and Europe, against Trump's policies. Despite Canadian patriotism possibly being on the rise due to Trump, Quebec doesn't need to be part of Canada to align with Canada and Mexico against the United States. While Trudeau's firmness is positive, talk of economic war is excessive, though Trump's actions suggest it. Canada should aim for free trade with exceptions for key sectors, ensuring reliable supply. The goal is to protect Quebec's interests and promote a united front against economic threats, without sacrificing key sectors for the benefit of others. We must define what we want: a comprehensive commercial negotiation to resolve matters as quickly as possible. We do not wish to use pricing as a tool for threats, nor to create insecurity, uncertainty, or fear, as Mr. Trump often suggests. Instead, we should focus on productive discussions, rather than wasting time on conflicts, so that we can engage in meaningful negotiations that benefit all parties, including Mexico and the broader Union, leading to a fair and sustainable outcome. In this context, we must acknowledge the significant pressure on the automotive industry, given Mr. Trump's push to repatriate production to the United States. However, protecting one sector should not come at the expense of others. For example, Quebec's workforce must not be sacrificed to safeguard the auto industry. Nor should we continue imposing artificially low prices on Quebec industries, surrender taxation rights on royalties to internet giants, or neglect Quebec's cultural sector, which is already under threat. The Bloc Québécois is committed to collaboration, as it has been for years, provided that Quebec's key economic sectors are not sacrificed to protect Ontario's automotive interests, Toronto's financial sector, or even Western Canada's petroleum industry. As for the Trump administration's approach, it is clear that its economic goal is to pressure companies to relocate their operations or headquarters to the United States. This strategy may succeed temporarily while economic conditions allow, but if inflation rises and economic promises go unmet, businesses will be forced to reconsider. In such a scenario, the U.S. will have to adjust its approach when the economic costs become unsustainable. Canada must remain resilient in the face of these challenges. The role of the Bloc Québécois is to ensure that Quebec's interests are not treated as bargaining chips in trade negotiations. Quebec will remain a reliable partner in discussions, offering expertise and strategic economic analysis. Our priority is transparency. We clearly state our goals rather than seeking mandates without a concrete plan. We must also move beyond narrow Canadian concerns and recognize the broader picture. Mexico, for instance, is deeply integrated into this economic framework, as are significant Quebec and Canadian investments that depend on the American market. Free trade extends beyond Canada. It includes Mexico, and we must unite with those who stand to lose from Trump's policies. Additionally, Europe is beginning to take a more proactive stance against U.S. economic and military strategies, with countries like England, France, and Germany reassessing their positions. Ultimately, this is not just a Canadian issue. It is a global one. We must consider the bigger picture and remain committed to a long-term vision, rather than getting lost in short-term political calculations. Quebecers must continue to have a strong voice in shaping these discussions, ensuring their interests are protected in Canada and beyond. I don't believe this situation will last long. It's simply a tactic. Mr. Trump has been instilling fear and uncertainty, and while that may intimidate people initially, it's beginning to make him seem less credible rather than more effective. Meanwhile, Canada has seized the opportunity to play the fear card as well. People may rally behind the government, but I don't believe it's out of Canadian patriotism. Rather, it's about standing together against a common adversary. That said, Quebec doesn't need to be part of Canada to align with Canada and Mexico against the United States. That's a misconception. Denmark, for example, is an independent nation that partners with Europe when necessary. We don't need to be assimilated or serve another country's interests to have our voice heard or to align strategically when needed. Personally, I no longer feel a strong Canadian identity. Like many Quebecers, I don't connect with that sentiment. My focus remains on representing Quebec's interests, hoping that people will recognize themselves in the work we do. However, it would take much more than the current situation for me to feel any closer to Canada. Regarding the Prime Minister's framing of the situation as a trade war rather than an economic war, I don't want to undermine his position entirely. However, while I won't discourage his stance, I believe that calling it an economic war is an overstatement. The language we use matters, and while the American president is fostering economic tensions, I wouldn't go so far as to adopt such extreme terminology. On the topic of trade, particularly concerning Saskatchewan's potash exports, Canada must proceed cautiously. Exporting goods at risk to an unpredictable buyer is a precarious economic strategy. Trust between supplier and customer is crucial, and we must not overlook key principles. In sectors like agriculture, cultural industries, and environmental policies, there should be well-defined exceptions in trade agreements, just as we have already established in law for supply management. However, industries such as potash, forestry, aluminum, and aerospace should not be subjected to unnecessary restrictions. The focus should be on negotiating a fair free trade agreement with specific exemptions, rather than retaliating with arbitrary tariffs. When Trump criticizes Canada, it's clear he aims to reshape trade in favor of the U.S. But I won't blindly align with the Canadian government just because they oppose him. Quebec has its own priorities. I've noticed the Liberal Party using this moment to rally support for electoral gains rather than focusing solely on economic strategy. While the Prime Minister has recently taken a firmer stance, I question whether it's a genuine conviction or merely political posturing. Good leadership should be rooted in honesty and clear communication, not just in leveraging crises for political advantage. Regardless of how this unfolds, the Bloc Québécois will remain steadfast in defending Quebec's economic interests. Beyond trade, we will continue to advocate for Quebec's language rights, secularism, environmental priorities, and unique vision for itself. Quebec's money should not be used against Quebec's own interests. Ultimately, in this period of political volatility, those who present themselves as stable and credible will emerge strongest. When it comes to confronting Mr. Trump, whether it's Mr. Carnot or Mr. Poirier leading Canada, that's for Canadians to decide. My role is to ensure Quebec has a strong voice, one that is willing to collaborate, but only with those who engage in good faith. Thank you.